They say food is life. But in here, food is power. My name's Marcus Reed. In 2008, I was sentenced to 20 years in a maximum security prison for armed robbery and assault. I thought I knew what hard time meant until my first meal behind bars. It wasn't the violence that broke me. It wasn't the isolation or the chains or even the walls. It was the food. The first tray they gave me looked like something scraped off the bottom of a garbage bin. Cold, gray mush. A spoonful of beans that smelled sour. A slice of bread so hard it could break a tooth. The guard shouted, "Eat up, Reed. You'll need it." I remember staring at that tray for 5 minutes, trying to figure out what I was even looking at. But hunger doesn't care what it looks like. I ate it, every bite, and I threw up 20 minutes later. That was day one. By the end of the first week, I understood what the veterans meant when they said, "You don't eat to live, you eat to survive." Most days, the food came out of massive steel pots in the kitchen, ladled onto trays like slop for pigs. It didn't matter what it was supposed to be. After hours of boiling, mixing, and reheating, it all looked and tasted the same. Breakfast was usually powdered eggs, oatmeal with chunks, or a mystery sausage that was more soy than meat. Lunch? Some days it was beans and rice. Other days, noodles swimming in oil. Dinner? Always gray meat, overcooked vegetables, and a slice of cornbread, so dry you'd need water to swallow it. And here's the thing, the portions were small. Never enough. Because in maximum security, hunger keeps men weak. And weak men are easier to control. In prison, food is currency. You can trade it, sell it, even use it to buy protection. A honey bun is worth more than a pack of cigarettes. A cup of coffee can get you a favor. A soup pack ramen noodles, that's gold. If you've got food, you've got status. If you don't, you're invisible. I saw men fight, bleed, and even kill over a single tray. I saw one guy stab another with a sharpened spoon because he stole a peanut butter packet. That's the truth people don't understand. The food itself is bad, but what it represents is worse. It becomes survival. Power. A reason to wake up every morning. After 6 months, I got assigned to the kitchen crew. And that's when I learned the real truth about what we eat. The food that reached our trays? Half of it was expired donations from government warehouses. Boxes marked not for human consumption. The other half was rejects from grocery stores, dented cans, moldy bread, and meat that was nearly spoiled. The kitchen smelled like death on hot days. We had to scrape mold off cheese. We'd cut green patches off potatoes and just boil the rest. And still we ate it. One morning, I found a rat inside the flour barrel. Dead. The sergeant looked at me and said, "Scoop it out. Keep cooking." I didn't argue. No one did. The human body adapts, but it doesn't forgive. After a year, my stomach hurt every night. I lost 25 pounds. My skin turned pale, and I started craving things I never thought about before: fresh fruit, milk, a cold soda. But we didn't have that, so we improvised. Some guys made spreads, prison feasts built from stolen food, commissary snacks, and creativity. We'd crush ramen noodles, mix in chips, tuna, mayonnaise, even pickle juice, all in a trash bag. Then we'd add hot water and let it sit until it puffed up like a casserole. We called it the hustle meal. And believe it or not, it tasted better than anything from the kitchen. That's when I realized, prisoners don't just eat food. We build it. We hustle it. We survive on it. But the worst part wasn't the hunger or the taste. It was knowing that sometimes the food was weaponized. Guards had the power to control when and what we ate. If there was a fight on the block, no dinner. If an inmate mouthed off, cold trays only. Sometimes they'd forget to feed an entire section for hours just to make a point. I'll never forget one night in winter 2011. They locked us down for a stabbing that happened 2 blocks over. No one on our unit was involved, but they punished us anyway. We sat in the cold, no food for 26 hours. When they finally brought trays, it was oatmeal. Cold, clumped, with chunks of something floating in it. Men devoured it like animals. And I did too. That's when I understood. Prison food isn't meant to feed you. It's meant to remind you where you are. Every bite in here comes with a memory. Every tray tells a story. And as I'd soon find out, some of those stories were darker than anything I'd seen on the streets. Because in the kitchen of a maximum security prison, food isn't just survival, it's control. And the people who control it control everything. People think prison kitchens are run by guards. They're not. They're run by inmates, men like me. The guards just watch from the sidelines, pretending they're in charge. In reality, the kitchen is its own world. A place where the rules of the prison don't apply. Where a man can rise, fall, or vanish, depending on what he does with a single tray of food. I started in the kitchen as a tray washer. It was the lowest position possible. 8 hours a day scraping leftovers, rinsing filth, stacking trays. The smell never left my clothes. It followed me back to the cell, into my dreams. But I didn't complain, because inside the kitchen, I saw opportunity. See, food doesn't just feed bodies here, it fuels everything. You control the kitchen, you control the block. And the man who ran the kitchen back then was Big Ray, a lifer with hands like hammers and eyes that saw everything. He wasn't the warden, but he had more power than any uniform in that building. Big Ray ran the kitchen like a kingdom. Every inmate who worked there owed him loyalty, and a percentage of what they earned on the side. Yes, you heard that right. On the side. The kitchen wasn't just for cooking meals. It was a full-blown black market operation. Inmates would sneak extra bread, meat, sugar, and seasoning out of the kitchen, wrap it in plastic, and smuggle it back to their cells. Guards pretended not to notice, because some of them were in on it too. Ray had deals with officers who'd turn a blind eye in exchange for cartons of cigarettes or coffee grounds. And every single piece of food that left that kitchen was accounted for, not on paper, but in favor and fear. One night, I saw a man trade a honey bun for a tattoo. Another day, someone swapped 2 ramen soups for a razor blade. And when fights broke out, Ray settled them with food. You two got beef? Fine. One of you goes hungry for a week. See how that feels. No one disobeyed. Because hunger hurts worse than fists. After 6 months, I worked my way up to line cook. It meant I could choose who got what portion. And in prison, that's like holding a loaded gun. You could make friends with a big scoop of meatloaf, or make enemies by giving them cold beans. And if you really wanted power, you could control who got dessert. Dessert was sacred. Pudding, cake, sometimes a cookie if we were lucky. It didn't matter if it was stale. It was sweetness in a place built on bitterness. I learned quick that one good dessert could buy loyalty that lasted weeks. Not all meals came from the main kitchen. Some were made in secret. Ray had a private setup in the back freezer. A little stove, a few pans, and ingredients stolen from the main stock. He'd cook for the guards who protected him. Eggs with Royale butter, toasted bread, even fried chicken sometimes. In return, those guards gave him whatever he wanted. Extra time in the freezer, fresh ingredients, or protection from random searches. To the outside world, it was just food. But inside, it was politics. One time, an inspector came for a surprise check. We had to hide spoiled meat behind the freezer wall and stack clean trays in front to block the smell. Big Ray told us, "You keep your mouth shut, you eat tomorrow. You talk, you starve." Nobody said a word. We passed the inspection. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking, if this is what we eat, what about the guys who can't work in the kitchen? What do they get? The answer came a week later. An inmate from C Block got sick. Real sick. He said the chili tasted off. Next morning, he was gone. Word spread that he'd eaten spoiled beef, the same batch we had thrown out days before. Someone had pulled it back out of the trash, reheated it, and served it again. That's when I realized the kitchen wasn't just dirty. It was deadly. That night changed me. I couldn't eat what I cooked anymore. Every smell turned my stomach. I saw food not as comfort, but as control, as danger, as death. But walking away from Big Ray's kitchen wasn't an option. He owned me. If I quit, I'd be marked. So I kept cooking, kept pretending, kept feeding men poison while trying to survive myself. But something strange happened after that. Some of us, the younger cooks, the ones who still had hope, we started saving clean food, hiding it, and sneaking it to the men who couldn't afford commissary. A few extra slices of bread, an apple here, a spoon of beans there. It wasn't much. But in prison, that's mercy. And mercy doesn't go unnoticed. That was the first time I realized food could also mean forgiveness. The same meals that broke us could also bring us together. And from that small act of rebellion, something started to shift. In me, and in the men around me. But mercy has a price. And when Big Ray found out we were feeding the hungry without his permission, he made sure we'd never forget it. Because in prison, kindness can get you killed. By the third week of Marcus's quiet mission, word had spread through the cell blocks. Someone was feeding the forgotten. The weak ones. The ones no one traded with. The ones the system wanted to disappear. It started small. A spoon of soup passed through the slot of a cell door. Half a loaf tucked inside a folded bedsheet. Tiny acts of mercy that rippled through a place built on fear. But mercy, in a world like this, is dangerous. The guards noticed first. Less food waste. Less noise at mealtime. They didn't know yet what Marcus was doing, but they felt it, control slipping through their fingers. And in prison, control is everything. One afternoon, a correctional officer stormed into the kitchen, boots echoing like thunder. "Who's been moving extra trays?" he barked. Nobody spoke. Marcus kept his head down, stirring the pot of watery beans. But inside, his chest was pounding. He'd been keeping a log, names of inmates he helped, hidden behind the lining of his shoe. It wasn't rebellion. It was survival for them, and maybe for his own soul. That night, tension broke loose. Inmates in Block C refused to return their trays. One shouted, "You feed dogs better than us." Another slammed his metal cup against the bars. Within minutes, it became a roar. Hundreds of voices, hungry and angry, shaking the foundation of the prison itself. Guards flooded in batons, shields, and tear gas. Trays flew. Smoke filled the air. The sound of boots, screams, and alarms merged into one brutal symphony. Marcus stood frozen at the end of the kitchen hallway, watching chaos spread from something he started with kindness. A hand grabbed his shoulder. It was Ramirez, a lifer, one of the men Marcus had secretly fed. He shoved Marcus behind a stack of flour bags. "Stay down, bro. They'll kill you if they find out it's you." Through the smoke, Marcus saw an officer pinned to the ground, another swinging wildly at shadows. The smell of burnt food mixed with the sting of gas. And then silence, sudden and sharp. A gunshot cracked the air. The riot was over. The next morning, everything was gone. The kitchen, trashed. The food supplies, locked away. The inmates, on 23-hour lockdown. Marcus sat in his cell, wrists aching from the cuffs. He could hear the muffled cries of others down the hall. He didn't eat that day. When the warden came, his face was calm, too calm. "You think you can play savior in my prison?" he asked. Marcus said nothing. "You caused a riot over slop and scraps," the warden hissed. Then he leaned closer. "You think you did something holy, but you just proved my point. These men don't deserve mercy." The warden walked away, his keys jingling like a taunt. But something had shifted, deeper than the riot, deeper than punishment. Inmates began to speak Marcus's name in whispers. The kitchen guy who tried to feed us. The one who cared. In a place where food was currency, Marcus had traded his safety for dignity. Weeks later, he was sent to solitary. For his own protection, they said. The walls there were colder, the silence heavier. But in that darkness, he found something that couldn't be locked up: purpose. He began writing, using a dull pencil and scraps of old menus, recipes, notes, words of hope. And on one torn piece of paper, he wrote, "They can starve our bodies, but they can't starve our souls." The riot didn't make the news. It never does. But inside those concrete walls, something unspoken changed. Guards began to look twice before tossing a tray. Inmates began to share what little they had. Marcus's story became legend, not of rebellion, but of hunger for humanity. In maximum security, food isn't just survival. It's power, control, and punishment. But for one man, it became a way to remind others they were still human. Even in hell, a loaf of bread can become a prayer. After 17 years behind concrete and steel, Marcus finally walked out. The gate buzzed open, the heavy door groaned, and sunlight hit his face like something he'd forgotten existed. He carried a small box, one Bible, a few letters, and the same pair of shoes he wore the night he got arrested. They didn't fit anymore. The world outside had changed, louder, faster, and colder in a different way. People moved past him without looking. Restaurants on every corner. Food everywhere. And yet, so many faces looked just as hungry as the ones he left behind. Marcus found a halfway house run by a local church. They gave him a bunk, a second-hand jacket, and a chance to start over. But he couldn't sleep. Every night, he dreamed of the kitchen, of boiling pots and hungry faces, of men who would never taste freedom or warmth or kindness again. One morning, he woke before dawn and walked to the edge of town. Behind an old grocery store, he saw a group of men sleeping on cardboard, wrapped in thin blankets. The smell of garbage, the sound of wind, and something in his chest broke open again. The next day, he borrowed a pot from a church and filled it with whatever he could find: rice, beans, some leftover vegetables. He carried it in an old cart and wheeled it to that same spot behind the store. At first, no one came. They stared, unsure. Then a young man stepped forward, skinny, shivering. Marcus handed him a bowl. "Eat," he said softly. "It's hot." Within minutes, the others gathered too. One bowl became 10. 10 became 30. And the man who once served meals behind bars was now serving grace on the streets. Word spread through the homeless community. They called him Chef Mercy. He didn't have a restaurant or a menu or money. But every day he cooked, whatever he could find, wherever he could stand. A local news crew heard about him. When they asked why he did it, Marcus looked into the camera and said, "Because I remember what it's like to be treated like you're not human. And I'll never let anyone eat like that again." The clip went viral. Churches started donating. Former inmates came to help. Men who'd shared trays with him years ago, now free, wearing aprons instead of chains. They built something small, but powerful. A mobile kitchen called Second Chance Meals. They drove from city to city, feeding ex-convicts, addicts, and anyone the system forgot. No forms. No questions. Just food and dignity. Marcus used to say, "You can't preach hope to a man whose stomach is empty." So he filled the stomachs first, then hearts followed. One day, while serving in a cold alley downtown, a police officer approached. Marcus froze for a second, instinct from years of fear. But the officer just said, "You used to be at Central Prison, right?" Marcus nodded. The cop smiled and held out his hand. "My brother was there when you cooked," said. "You saved his life." For the first time, Marcus didn't see a badge. He saw a person, and he realized his mission had come full circle. Today, Marcus runs a small community kitchen. He teaches ex-inmates how to cook, how to serve, and how to forgive themselves. He says food is still power, but now it's the power to heal. He keeps one photo on the wall, a faded image of the prison kitchen. Next to it, a handwritten note. We were hungry then. We're feeding others now. This is what freedom tastes like. From a prison riot to a street kitchen, Marcus's story reminds us. Sometimes redemption doesn't come through words or sermons, but through something as simple as a meal shared with a stranger. Because in a world that starves the soul, compassion is the only food that never runs out.